here. Wonderful. Well, my name is Megan, and if you're new to the group, a warm welcome. If not, it's so nice to see you again. So many familiar faces. I live in Fairfield, Vermont, and I own Paint and Sip VT. I started this business 4 or 5 years ago, and it's really expanded quite a bit over the past couple of years with our virtual offering. So it's a pleasure to be here. I absolutely love doing this. Not only it's something that brings me joy or makes me really happy, but I love that it gives you all a break. I love that you all are like embracing an opportunity to try something creative. Many of you, you've evolved your skills. You're just getting into it truly. And I'm so proud of you. But I'm glad that you are here for you. That's the most important part. One of the things with these classes is I will always encourage you to be yourself and bring your own style. If you're trying to like totally copy something I'm doing, that's fine. If that helps you train and learn a technique, go for it. But you have my wholehearted permission to bring in your own style and pizzazz along the way. So that's a really important thing about art. Once you practice more and more, you really start to develop your own style on how you paint and your techniques and how you mix colors. Those all become really individualistic. I like talking about it because sometimes teachers don't talk about that. So I'm here to guide you, but I certainly want you to incorporate your own ideas along the way. All right. So in the chat window, I posted our inspiration. We're doing a beautiful koi fish pond with green lily pads. Any modifications, this is really our inspiration. This is our theme. So you get to decide the placement of these lily pads. You get to decide the number of fish we add to our pond. And we'll talk through some of that scale. In addition to your brushes, you'll need a pencil if you missed that. So if you have a pencil, that's wonderful. If you don't have a pencil, that's okay. Are there any questions before we get started? Otherwise, we'll jump right in. Wonderful. Well, a warm welcome, and I'm so glad you're here tonight. I'll go ahead and pin my video. There we go. So you can see me nice and large. If you're new to Zoom, in the top right-hand corner, there's a gallery view and there's a spotlight view. You can control what you see in that. But we'll go ahead and jump in and get started. All right. So one of the first things I'm going to talk through is we're going to do a little bit of planning with regards to the elements on our canvas. So I want to show you a couple of ideas as we get going here. So I took a piece of paper earlier. And I was starting to sketch out the scale of my fish. So how big or how small I might want something to appear on my canvas. So you can see these fish are pretty small. And I put a couple on there just to see, okay, well, what do I want this to actually look like when I'm done with it? So I added a couple lily pads and I added a nice lotus flower up here on the top. So we'll add in a lot of those elements together. But I wanted to give you a couple of examples for you to think about what you want for size and scale. A second example I'll share with you, and a third, is the middle. You can see my fish got a little bit bigger in size. So it's kind of like I'm zooming in a little bit, right? My lily pads are a little bit bigger, and my fish are a little bit bigger. And then you can see on the right or over here, this fish is actually a little bigger than this one. So you can think about, for your picture tonight, maybe the size that you want your fish to be, maybe how big or small you might want your lily pads to be. You can see some of these are on and some of these are off. And the way I started these sketches is by just starting with the fish placement first. And then I go around and I'll add the lily pads on after. So what we'll do together is I am torn, ladies and gents, on if I want the bigger fish or the smaller fish. I might do the smaller fish. I kind of like the simplicity of it, but you can do bigger fish if you want. So you get to decide. So we're going to start together and we're going to do some sketching with our pencils for these elements and for these shapes. Now I'm going to pull up the screenshot or some of the visuals so I can look at the shape of the fish as I draw the fish. So I can look at the shape of the lily pads as I draw the lily pads. So it's always helpful to have something to reference as you get going, because some people have the drawing knack, the ability to shape an object, and sometimes it takes a little more practice. And sometimes when you look at a form, it helps you, it gives you a little more confidence to draw it more effectively. So let's do that together. Now, if there's any questions throughout the class, do not hesitate to ask. I like to keep this conversational, super light, but I'm going to bring this in nice and close so we can do this together. All right. So we're first going to start out by identifying, we're going to do the fish object first. So for me, I'm going to do probably one fish kind of coming up here in the middle, and I'm going to try to find balance. So I might do another fish kind of coming on the canvas. Look at that. I'm just drawing a line. And if you can't see this, I'll probably use a Sharpie or a pen. Let's see here. I'll use a Sharpie tonight so you can see what I'm doing. 1 minute. Let me grab a Sharpie. But think about what you want those fish elements to be. And for me, I'm going to have a fish that's going to kind of come on, and it's going to have a little bit of an S. And it has a little bit of a rounded head. And then the tail and the body get a little skinnier. So this might be one fish that's kind of coming on. And then I might have another. For me, the fish are a little bit of an S figure. They can have any kind of shape that you want. And this is where you have a pencil and you can kind of be playful a little bit. The head is rounded. The middle of the body is pretty big as well, but as you get to the tail, it gets a little more skinny. So take a minute to sketch your fish. So for me, I'm just modifying. My head is not a full circle on the end. It's a little bit of an oval. And you can do some back fins. This is where there's no rush. Some lower fins. And the fins are kind of like, they're kind of like leaf shaped. They're kind of wider in the middle, and they're kind of pointy towards the end. If you've been in these classes, you've painted a leaf before, likely. And if you don't like a line, you can always erase it. So know that. For me, my tail needs to be a little wider down here on the end. So the fish are going to have leaf shape. They're going to have front fins. And then they're going to have a couple of tail fins, some smaller tail fins for right now. And somehow these look like fish. I'm not sure I had that happen right out of the gate for me. I'm pretty impressed here, but take your time. I want you to look at kind of the width of the body and the head and the shape of the head. This is where you can kind of just refine some of these shapes. This fish's head is a little bit bigger. Kind of looks like a shark to me, but that's all right. You can always reshape things. But the fins are kind of pointy on the end. So you have a little bit of this, it's a little elongated. And especially the tail fins, these can be a little bit longer on the ends. Like they're just wisping along in the water. We're going to add a lot of colors to this, but these are just, it's basic framework. And I'm not going to add in any of the fin detail or anything like that yet, because I'm going to focus on just these primary objects first. So if I think about the composition, and I want everyone to look at their own, for me, I want a balance of objects. So for me, I have a space here and I have a space up in the corner, and I'm going to start with the lily pads are going to be round in shape. But they might have like a little dip in them, but I'll show you how to do that with your pencil. So for me, I'm going to go for it and just do a rounded lily pad. Visually, I'm just going to kind of layer a lily pad behind. Kind of like pancakes. They can be as big or as small as you please. I might do another lily pad down here on the bottom corner. And I'll do one more lily pad in this top corner. So I want you to think about the composition, which is the balance of objects, where you put things and why. And these lily pads kind of have these shapes in them. And I'll come in with some black paint and I can cover this right up, this little dip. But if you have an eraser, you can kind of come in and fix that now. It's just adding a little bit of texture.
Does the lily pad include those pink flowers that you have?
The flowers are going to be, they're going to be on top. So for me, I'm going to, we'll do the flowers next. We'll draw the flowers in kind of on top. If you don't want a lily pad there and you want just a floating flower, you can hold that space for a floating flower, if that makes sense. So for me, maybe I'll put a small lotus down here. That could be a really fun thing for me to do. And maybe I'm going to do a lotus in the top corner. Maybe I'll do another down here just to balance the picture out. And I'll show you how to, we'll draw in those lotuses, but I want to give everyone time to get your base fish in first and then the lily pads. And I don't want to rush anyone, but take your time here and give me a thumbs up or use the chat if you feel like you're pretty close, but take your time with those drawings. Okay, cool. So if anyone wants to try these flowers, I'm going to add one down here. And it's pretty symmetric. It's a lotus. So it's going to be 6 petals. And I'm just doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I can always change the shape of this if I want. And then behind it, you do another tier to build out the flower shape. And these are nice pointy petals. And you're layering behind. So take your time. There's no rush here. I'm going in between these petals. And as I work my way out, the layers, the size of the petals are going to get bigger. So you can see the smaller petals are in here, are a little smaller. And then it got a little bit bigger. If I want to come in and add in like another little one here, you can. Doesn't matter. This is where I just want you to be playful. We're going to paint this in. And you're using a pencil. I'm using a Sharpie so you can see it. And I might do one more. Actually, I'll keep that small for right now. I'm going to put one more lotus up here. And this one's going to be a little bit bigger. And for me, I'm going to do like the lotus kind of in this bigger space with a green lily pad kind of in the background. So I'm just going to rinse and repeat. I love lotus. It's like a very calming way to kind of paint a flower. So you start small, and then in between, you do another layer. So just kind of keep working your way around the exterior of the smaller one. Don't feel rushed. Nice and pointy on the end. Again, we can come in with our paintbrush to fill this all in. But just use your eye. One of the things I like to teach in these classes is just to be mindful and reflect on your shape and reflect on your object as you're painting it. So for me, I just leaned back to reflect on the overall shape. So you can see I have some bigger ones down here. I could keep going, but for me, I'm going to say, okay, where can I find balance? Let's see, maybe I'll just do another smaller one over here. And I might be happy with that. I'm taking a very simplistic approach to this drawing and these elements that I'm placing. Now, where you see all of this blank space, guess what? That's okay. This is going to be our water. In the picture, it's black. If you're inspired to do blue water, you can. So if you haven't taken one of my classes before, I'll always encourage you to use whatever colors you want to use in whatever places. But for me, I'm going to stay simple for right now. And I'm going to reflect saying, do I want to add anything else, any other objects anywhere before I jump into my paints? And look at yours and kind of think about what you've added. And if you wanted to add anything else, for me, I'm going to keep it simple and just think about it for a moment. Which is quite fun. And I took a step back and I might add another petal to my flower. So you will, ladies and gents, notice something when you walk away and you come back. So this is where we're dialing in these details. And the more details you add, you will have to paint it in, but there's no rush, right? You can take as long as you want to do this project. How is the sketching going? How do folks feel? If there's any questions, definitely let me know. For me, I'm thinking, do I want to add any more lily pads? That's what I'm thinking about right now. Thinking about maybe adding one more smaller one here, maybe just to round it in. Again, it's that reflection as you work. I'm going to keep it simple, just like that. So your drawings don't have to be perfect. These are placeholders for where we're painting. So I will unpin myself and I will go to my gallery view and look at each of you and check in. Give me a thumbs up if you're pretty good with your drawings. I don't want to rush you. Nearly. Okay. Okay. So we're gonna move on. Thank you all for your feedback. All right. So I'm going to repin and we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna jump into painting now. Now let's start easy with our confidence boosting. Let's start with our green and let's paint the lily pads first, which will be quite fun. So for me, the lily pads are going to be a darker green, and then we're going to add some lighter green for some elements, for some detail that's going to be on top of it. So the approach that I'm taking tonight is I'm going to make not a forest green, but I'm going to make a little bit of a darker green. So the green I have on my palette out of the box is like a green grass green. I'm going to add a little bit of black to it to make it a little bit darker. Doesn't have to be crazy dark, but I'm going to make it a little touch darker. And the brush size I'm going to use is I'm going to use like a size 5. Just a medium-sized brush would be fine. Any medium-sized brush that has a good tip on it. Let's see here. So if you've taken my classes in the past, I'm going to use a number 5, but I'm kind of using a round tip, kind of long bristled brush. This is the nylon bristle. And I'm going to always get my paintbrush a little bit wet as I get going. And I'm going to mix this dark green with you all. So I might take some of this green and kind of move it over to the side, but I'm going to bring a little bit of black into this and just create a little bit of a darker tone. Now, a little bit of black goes a long way. So I might have a nice forest green out of the bat here. And it might look dark on your screen, but it's actually not too bad here in person. And we're just going to fill in all of our lily pads with this color. So this is nice and dark. I always start with the outlined edge of the lily pad. And this is where you take your time, no rush. Nice smooth brush strokes. I don't know about you all, but I love this inspiration already. So much fun. So we're gonna do a lot of the background elements first. We could have jumped in and did the water first, but we're gonna do the lily pads just to get a nice coat on. Now, anywhere you might need to downsize your brush, you can. For me, I'm going around my flower. My flower on the bottom is setting on top of one of my lily pads. So I'm just gently using, I'm just kind of pivoting my brush, using the bristles to have a nice clean edge as I outline the flower on that green lily pad down here. And if you want to switch brushes, feel free. There's a lot of detail in this painting, so we're going to just jump right into it. As you fill in these lily pads, just do nice clean brush strokes. I might need a bigger brush. If you need to upsize, you can always, if you have lots of bigger spaces, you can always get a bigger brush to apply the paint more quickly. For me, that smaller brush is just taking too long. There we go. I increased my brush size. Nice smooth brush strokes to fill in. I'm not using any water to fill this in. Sometimes in my classes, they like to use water. If you want to, you can. I'm not doing that in this class, at least for right now, because I want these lily pads to be nice and solid in color. And I'm doing horizontal brush strokes just to have a consistent kind of look and feel, but try to do, your brush strokes can be even rounded. Just try to be consistent in how you fill these in, because you will see the brush strokes. So for this upper lily pad, I'm kind of doing rounded brush strokes just to add in a little bit of that roundness for the shape. That always works too. We're going to add a lot of texture on top of these. This is just a base color, so don't worry too much. It's kind of fun to see some of the texture of the brush strokes come through as well. But nice rounded brush strokes will give you a rounded lily pad shape, which is kind of fun. So in the one down here in my bottom left corner, I could do rounded brush strokes, kind of like this is kind of like a rainbow shape a little bit. So it's bended. So I'm doing bending brush strokes to fill this in. And you really want a clean edge. So I just did something bad down here. I was hurrying and I didn't have a very clean edge. So you want a clean edge where the lily pad meets the water. And a clean edge means nice and smooth line. And we're going to come in and we'll paint the whole background. So don't worry about that, but just take a minute to fill in these lily pads. And as we're doing that, how many fish did people decide to paint tonight? You can unmute or and share, or you can put it in the chat. I would love to hear how many y'all decided to paint.
I did too. This is
Two?
Jill. Two.
Are
Yeah.
they big or small, Jill?
I kind of copied you exactly. So
So they're medium-sized fish.
yes.
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I let my inner artist just do it.
I figure this is my first time, so I'm gonna just follow you.
No, it's all good. It's sometimes like typically you just do what comes to you and you just go with it. So all good. All good. So I am gently going in and around. My flower is overlapping my my lily pad up here. So if you need to downsize brushes to have a nice clean edge of an object, feel free to do that. And I think, yeah, I think I have a little bit right here. Make sure you don't paint your flower in. I had to do a double check on my shapes. And you can decide if you want a second coat on these lily pads. For me, like where I have kind of silly brush strokes, I might just do like a quick second coat. You might want to dip your brush in a little bit of water. Maybe that will help you with some of the blending. You might be happy with the base coat. But we are going to kind of lighten and create some shapes and textures on top of these lily pads in just a few minutes. So we're just going to let these dry. Okay. So I will look around the room and see how folks are doing with their green lily pads. Give me a thumbs up if you're pretty close to being done, and give me a 1 more minute signal if you need another minute to fill in those lily pads. Okay, so take your time with those lily pads. Take your time. And if you're enjoying your tea or wine tonight, don't forget to stay hydrated. Very important. Forget to stretch, lean back in your chair. This is a part of the process where we don't rush. I'm leaning back and I might do a second coat on some areas of these lily pads, so they're nice and smooth in color. Some are a little darker, some are a little lighter. That's okay. Your lily pads don't need to look all the same. As long as they're in the same family, they're related, that's fine. Absolutely. And we will have an opportunity to go back in and fill in these lily pads before we add the detail, but we are going to purposely let them dry. And we're going to do our pink flowers next. So if anybody wants to mix a pink, I'm using the red, and I'm going to add a touch of white. So there's no rush if you're still working on your lily pads. Don't worry about that. But I'm going to take a minute to mix my pink, a pink color that I enjoy. And this is going to be the darkest pink of your flowers. And if you want to use a different color pink or a different color for your flowers, you may, if you're inspired to do orange lotuses or white lotuses, that's totally up to you. You can always make those decisions, and I will always support that. And I'm going to get a pink ready for these flowers. And I'm doing red and a touch of white. And one of the things, as we're talking about our flowers, we'll shift that there in just a minute. I'm going to make 2 tones of pink. I'm going to make a full on the darker color, and I'm going to make a tiny touch of a lighter tone. And look at that. I'm putting it kind of right next to this. This is going to be an accent color I'm going to use as I paint these flowers in. I'm going to create a little bit of brightness as I go, which is a new technique if you've taken any of my classes before. So I'm going to, out of the gate, I'm going to mix 2 tones of pink. I'm going to make my darker tone of pink. I'm going to make a lighter tone of pink. So take a minute to mix those colors. If you're not done your lily pads, don't worry. We'll come back to those, but I want to make sure you have enough time to do the fish and the water and everything, just to be mindful. And these flowers are going to be incredibly detailed. You all are going to love this part. We're going to slow right down and do some really beautiful details together. But having a pink and a lighter, and this is not a lot of paint, ladies and gents. This is like less than 1/4 size of paint for each of these. A pink and a lighter pink. I'm actually gonna, we'll use a little bit of white after, but we'll add a little bit of white detail as well. And as we transition to paint our flowers, I have a number 2 brush in my hand, but this is another like a smaller brush if you don't have these, and it has a nice, I want you to have a nice tip on it. So something you can have a little control as you go in between all these lines. And these flowers are quite easy to paint. We'll do them in steps and stages together, and it'll be quite fun. So we're going to start in the middle of the flower, and we're going to work our way out. And this is going to be incredibly relaxing. I will start in this top left corner. We're going to start in the middle of the flower, and we're going to paint in each of these leaves, but just the middle area first. So these first 6 leaves. Nice and easy. It's a little bit of a change from previous classes where we kind of paint on objects with the color. Tonight, we were a little more thoughtful of placement and the details up front. And I'm using my pinky to stabilize my hand. Pinky is bouncing right on my canvas. Now, if you wanted to do the next tier of petals, you can. I always do the outline first. If you feel like that's going to mess you up, like you're not going to be able to see the other petals, maybe we'll just do the outline of that second range first. Doesn't matter, any way that you want to go about this is fine, but we'll show you how we're going to go in and add a little bit of extra detail along the way here with that lighter pink. So do some nice smooth brush strokes, nice clean lines. I'm going to go ahead and fill in this second bit of petals, and we're going to do one flower at a time. So you don't have to bop around if you have multiple flowers like me. We're going to do one together, and then we'll pivot and do others as well. So stick to one flower first. So I'm only doing 2 layers, and some of you might have 2 layers of petals and that's it, totally fine. Some of you might have 3 or 4, that's fine too. But we'll stop at 2 layers of petals, getting in this nice rich color, whatever you've decided. And then we're going to use a little bit of this lighter pink. And this is where you can use any size brush that you want. I might actually downsize, might as well. Let's get a little crazy here. You can use a 1, or you can use any small brush that you want. I'm going to have fun and use one of my tiny ones. And this is a size 1, so some of you might even have this. And on the edges of the petal, so like where the petal outline is, we're going to do a light pink outline. So we're just going to outline these petals, kind of where your original pencil marks were. We're going to outline in this light pink. And you don't have to go all the way down and outline the whole thing. You don't have to do that. But we're creating a little bit of brightness. And for me, I'm painting over a Sharpie, so I'm going to probably have to do a couple layers here, but that's all right. But use the light pink to create a little bit of an outline. And don't feel rushed. This is a really fun part of the class. You might be able to see what I'm doing. It might be a little bit. Let's see if I can bring this in a little bit more. But I want you to be playful on how you add this in. I can see my Sharpie through. Many of you likely can't because you didn't use a Sharpie, unless you did, and that's okay. And I just want you to continue with this technique. We're going to bring it to life even more, but continue with this pink leaf technique to fill in all those petals. And if you need to do a second coat, feel free. And then do the pink outline. And then we'll come in with a little bit of white after. So bring this flower to life any way that you wish. Some of you might have a ton of petals like me. Some of you may not. I went a little crazy. But I love the lotus. It's a sign of prosperity, balance, and beauty. And there's beauty in a lot of things. And it's such a beautiful flower. If you wanted to add any lightness to this lotus and to this flower as you paint, if it's a lot of pink for you, feel free to add any lighter pink or even mix white to make it even lighter. And you can, on the edges is where we're going to create a little bit of lightness. So if you're maybe losing petals, like blending into one another, and your lighter pink isn't cutting it, what you can do is, and I'll give you an example, with one of your smallest brushes, let's see here, we're going to do a dusting of this white on the edge. So what does that look like? So the white on the edge, kind of like where we put the light pink, we're just going to add a little bit of white. And I'll do a few examples so you can see it. We're just going to start to highlight and bring out some of the flower detail with a little bit of white, just like the picture. So if you feel like you need to use a white or a dusty white, maybe with a little bit of a pink, this is where you can be playful with some of the details. But sometimes if you use a pencil, you can lose track of the petals pretty quickly. So if you want to use the white to go in to re-highlight those edges now, feel free. So I'm just going to do a little bit of that for you just so you can see it. There. So I used a little bit of white on the edges of the petals just to bring that to life. You can always bring in a little soft pink to kind of smudge it in a little bit to make it a little bit more transparent. So together we'll fill in these flowers at your own pace. And we'll repeat this. How many flowers did folks do? I did 2. This class has a lot of detail in it. And after the flowers, we'll do a show and tell if folks want to show off their work. But we'll spend a little bit of quiet time just to dial in these flowers together. It's been a long week. I hope you're all looking forward to the weekend. It's going to be cold in Vermont, but I think most of us know how to stay warm. Hopefully our homes cooperate. All right. So for me, as I work my way on the outside of this flower, I'm outlining the edges of the petal. I'm doing a nice clean edge. I'm working my way around, filling in these petals. And where you need to use that white and the light pink to not lose track of those petals, feel free to bring that in whenever you want. You can see that helps tremendously. And again, using your pinky to stabilize is really helpful. Some of you might have another technique, so do whatever is making you comfortable filling in some of these designs. For me, I'm just filling in the solid pink first. That is my process. So filling in my leaves, and then I'll go in with a little bit of the white and a little bit of the light pink to do some of the edging. So the white in this case is the light kind of reflecting off the tops and the edges of these leaves, of these petals, which is quite beautiful. You could get really detail oriented. We'll do just enough for tonight, and then you can dial in as much more detail as you wish. And you can see the Sharpie. It's not only, it's helping you see what I'm doing, but any of you could always use a Sharpie if you wanted like a nice solid black lines to start with. Sometimes it's nice, gives you a little more confidence. The only problem with the Sharpie is you know, doesn't have an eraser kind of out of the gate. But what if you do pencil first and then you do a Sharpie on top, it could give you some nice solid lines to hang on to. So it's always something to consider. Again, there's no rules. You can paint what you want, how you want, in any way that you want as you go here. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use, again, a very small brush to do some of the outlines of the petals. I'm not going to go too crazy because I want to be mindful of time tonight. But I'm just to outline these petals nice and smooth. Using my pinky, just working my way around. Now, if you're using acrylic paint, you'll know if you paint something you don't like, you can always paint on top of it. Glorious. So as I add in some of this white for the edging, and I'm still working on one flower. I'm going to get one flower in a spot where I'm like fairly happy, and then I'm going to pivot. But you can pivot to your other flowers if you want to. That works. No judgment. So I'll bring this a little closer so you can see it. So I did solid pink, dark dark pink petals, and then I just did the white outline. So it's just a little bit of white. It might look like a pink, but it's not. You can still, I have some black Sharpie coming through. I'll do a second coat over to hide some of those lines after. But for me, that has a solid base of color. If I want to go in and make it look snazzier, I intend to, but I'm going to pivot and go to my next flower. So I'll keep an eye on the clock. We're doing well. And there's no rush, but I'm just going to fill in that second flower just the way I did the top one. And if anyone has any questions along the way, do not hesitate to ask. I am incredibly excited to see how you're all doing here in just a few. What do y'all think so far? How did folks do painting or kind of outlining the flowers and the fish? Was that difficult, or do you feel like y'all did pretty well with that?
I'm loving it. I'm having fun.
Good, good, good. It helps a lot just to take, you know, the first 10, 15 minutes just to pre-plan on what you want to do and why. And a lot of artists do that. So when you see the really fancy ones with the perfectly painted sailboats, they outline their sailboats first usually. A lot of watercolor artists do that with big, beautiful mountains and the detail you see on mountains. They do pencil sketches to give them base outline because it really allows them to define the composition and define the scale of an object. So it's quite fun to slow down and do that. And we'll incorporate more of that into additional classes this year of just new ways of doing things.
Yeah, I did watercolor, and that's what I used to do. I always drew my pictures.
Sketched. Yes, you always
I
draw them
always
first.
sketched my pictures. Yep.
Yep, absolutely.
That was 20 years ago, so I'm getting back into painting again.
Oh, I love it. Great. I really want to get into and offer like a watercolor and ink class this year.
That's what I did. I did watercolor and ink.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Oh,
I have a giant picture hanging in my living room. I wish I was upstairs of a painting I did when I was 20 of two polo ponies, and they're in the middle of this massive polo game, and I'm like, I did that.
Well, yeah, maybe you should be our special guest instructor here in 2022. We'll stay in touch.
Oh my, I know, huh?
Yeah,
Get back into my watercolor roots.
Absolutely. I love it.
I obviously bought really artist quality watercolors because I'm 52 now. I did that when I was 20, and it looks just like I painted it.
Oh, so cool.
So I obviously had a brain on my head then.
Yeah,
or a brain in my head.
Send me a picture. I'd love to see your work.
I will. After the class, I'll take a picture and send it to you.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, we get pretty experimental in these classes of using water and not using water. And I think it's important for folks to know that art is a very fluid activity where you can try things and it's okay.
Yeah, I've been actually doing some Bob Ross painting experiments, and I did one, and my husband's like, "You painted that?" I said, "I know.
Awesome.
I can't believe I did that."
That's great. There's a lot of great resources out there for different.
So much. It's just so much fun and relaxing.
Absolutely. Especially if you find a nice theme that you like. It's like,
yes,
even
mine was horses, obviously.
Yeah.
back then.
Horses are difficult, so more power to you.
Gosh, I have drawings. I have a whole box of drawings I did when I was 9, 10, 11 years old of my horse drawings.
Oh, wow.
I found them. I was like, oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
It was
Definitely
so cool.
share those with family.
Yes.
Wow.
I have to put them in a scrapbook.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the precious work that you don't want to
It was
lose.
so awesome. I'm like, wow. That's
really fun. Very nice. Well, I'm so glad you shared that.
Gosh, I'm so glad I discovered you.
Yeah.
This is so much fun.
Good. Well, I don't do free classes that often, but I'm so glad you're here. I will try to do one free class a month kind of moving forward, which would be really fun.
That's how I found you on AARP. Isn't that funny?
Yes, yeah. Well, I do a lot of classes with AARP.
So that was awesome.
Yep. Wonderful group. A lot of folks on this call are with the AARP group.
Yeah. So thank you for offering some free
Of
classes.
course, of course. So my goal is I want to fill these flowers in, ladies and gents. And some of you might be super speedy and way ahead of me, but take your time. For me, again, I'm doing the base color of the pink first, and then I'm going in and outlining the edges with a little bit of white. I am going to come back to these, but I want to make sure we get through many of our details so we don't run out of time of class tonight. If you want to do your flower edges along the way, if the white is too punchy, you can use that light pink. You are all in the zone. I love it. That's what you should, it's exactly where you should be. Unwinding and relaxing. We are going to have for me, I'm going to do a beautiful, like black kind of winding river through this. Should be quite stunning. We're going to add that in next. We'll do the black river next, the black water. Now, again, if you wanted to do blue, you could do blue, but for me, I'm looking for that contrast in my painting tonight. So the fish elements truly stand out. And as well as the flowers and then the green. So I'll bring this a little closer. There is nothing fancy I'm doing over here, I promise, ladies and gents. I have pink flowers with white outlines. That's it. I'm going to go in and I'm going to bedazzle them a little bit later. So don't forget to like stand up and stretch. You know, I don't want you in an awkward position here that doesn't feel good after. So stretch your body a little bit. And I will pause and I'll look around the room just to check in on some folks, and I'll remove the pin and look at gallery. Give me a thumbs up or a 1 more minute. How y'all feeling right now with those basic pink flowers? I have minutes.
I need 1 more minute.
Yep, take your time. Douglas, how's it going over there? Oh, nice. Beautiful. Your lily pads look awesome. Oh, cool. Nice. It's fun to paint something a little bit different, isn't it, Douglas?
It is fun. It's very different. Yeah.
It is different. Absolutely. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing. If anybody else wants to flip their picture around when it's a good point, we'd love to see it.
Getting there. I'm getting there.
Yeah. We'll take your time. There's no rush. I'm here if there's any questions. I might do a second coat over some of these black lines. Anyone has any suggestions or ideas for the free March class? I have a few, but if you have anything in particular that you're interested in painting, feel free to think about that in tonight's class, and I'm open to any ideas or suggestions you might have. And I'll be picking a date and time over the next week for February, rather, not March, sorry, February. Lose track of what month we're in here.
I wish it was going to be March.
I know. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also, I chose the 6 o'clock start time. If there's another preferred time, definitely share any feedback on what days or times might be good for you. Typically with AARP, we do like a 5 o'clock on Thursdays. That's typically hard for me and my family, so I picked 6 selfishly. However, if 5 is better, just let me know.
6 is much better for me.
Okay, thank you for the feedback. And I can even share that feedback with AARP if that's overwhelmingly popular. So I'm just going to reflect here on my work. My flowers are not done yet. I'm going to let them sit there the way they are before I do other elements. Once you add the black in for the water and the grays, we're going to add like a grayish black for the water to kind of fill in. We'll do that as a next step. So we'll transition here in a minute because the fish are going to be a lot of detailed work as well. We're going to come back to our flowers to add additional detail work. We'll be inspired as we add the detail for our fish and add movement for the water. You will be inspired to add additional detail to your flowers if you wish. Otherwise, you can keep them as simple as you want as well. So again, you are the artist and you are in control and you will do what you want. And that is what I always encourage. But how do folks feel slowly transitioning to do the water? So we have lots of time. Cool. There we go. Beautiful, Miss Lisa. Look at those. Gorgeous work. She added a lot more white. I'm jealous. I haven't done that yet, Miss Lisa. Good work. All right, so I'm going to repin my screen and we're going to do as a group, when you're ready to transition, we're going to mix I want you to choose what you want your watercolor to be. So for me, I am going to do this dark black. I'm going to add a little bit of gray to soften it, but I'm going to start pretty heavy with black. So I'm going to grab the biggest brush I have, which is this like 5/8 brush, just a large flat tip brush. If you've received kits from me, that's what these are. To grab one of the bigger ones. And I'm going to mix like a little bit of white with black just to soften it, just a tone. If you wanted to add like a touch of like green to it, you could. For me, I'm going dark and then I'm going to layer on top of it. So I'm going to do some like gray layers and tones in. And this is where I want you to paint everything but the fish. So all of this white space around your flowers, this is going to take a little bit of time. That's why I want us to jump in. I'm going to start kind of in the top right-hand corner. We're kind of just going to fill the background in. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to flow the water, like the water's flowing. And that's how I'm going to fill in this background. So I'm going to come along my fish. The water's going to have a little movement to it. The water's going to, you don't have to paint vertically. Try to be really imaginative on how you're painting this water. See, I'm coming down and I'm going to flow. See how the shape, how my fish are flowing? It's coming down and flowing in towards the middle and down. If your background seems really dark, don't worry. You can always lighten it. You could do that now, or you could do it after. So for me, if you want to have like a little bit of a gray going next to your black, you can use 2 kind of colors going back and forth to fill in this water. That's totally fine. You can do a mix of grays and blacks flowing and creating this water movement. So I'm being, look at how my angle is. I'm filling in and I'm creating this water movement coming down. So have fun with how you add and you fill in spaces. We do this with mountains. We don't just do vertical brush strokes or horizontal brush strokes. We tend to fill in mountains with like the flow of the mountain. And the mountain very vertical or is it more flowing? And I like to spin, if you're using a bigger brush, you can spin your big brush on the side to have a more narrow brush stroke as you get closer to objects. You can also downsize your brush if you don't want to use this bigger one towards like near your fish. I've had a lot of practice, so I can kind of get in pretty closely. But if you want to use a smaller brush to get into the smaller places, feel free to do that. And you can kind of hold your canvas. Sometimes that helps too. Try not to drag your finger in the paint. I typically do that often as a lefty. Put my pinky in something and then something happens and it just doesn't look good. But I'm painting around my fish. I have a very tiny spot up here. I'm going to get that after. I'm alternating between a gray and a black to fill in this space. And I tend to follow an outline, whatever object, to not get the black in it. And again, you can add as much of a lighter gray and movement here as you wish. So if you wanted to bring in a little bit more gray as you paint for water movement, feel free. When you use acrylic, it dries really quickly, which is really forgiving. So if you don't like something you add in with a gray, guess what? You can paint right over it, which is wonderful. Being very careful around these lotus flowers. And this is where all the hard work that we did and we spent on our flowers and on these lily pads are pretty basic right now, but I'm painting around this lotus ever so gently with black and gray. And I'll continue this fluid motion. Like I'm getting a little crazy. Fluid motion down and around. And this is where this is one of those pieces of art that it could definitely take 3 hours. We will not spend 3 hours on the call tonight. If we go over an hour and a half, which we likely will, that's fine. I will try to cap us at 2 to be mindful of folks' time. But we're not going to rush. That's the most important thing. I will get us through all of the basic details and then you can refine, which is nice. So again, I'm being thoughtful on how the water is flowing through this painting. And I'm kind of going here and there, which is kind of fun. And a little bit of movement through the middle. Again, I'm bringing in a little bit of gray just to see how that goes along the way here. If you don't like your fins, for me, I might make some modifications. Don't worry, just use whatever fin shapes you have right now. Because the fins are going to be lighter in color and we can paint that right on top of the black. So the pencil was really just a guide. So just to hold shape and space for the fish. You can also use the black just to really refine the shape of the fish as well. So for me, this fish its head was a little big for me. So I can actually, look at that, easily reshape this fish's head with my black paint. Look at that. And I actually just made it look a little bit better. So you can reshape the outline. You have to be careful. You might not want to do this, but you can if you want. If you wanted to use a little water to fill in this black, you can. I'll just do that just so you can see what it looks like. I don't want to use too much, but it might give me a kind of fun fluid look. A little bit of water on my brush with a little bit of black paint. You can spin your brush in your hand. Again, you can use your big brush for all of this, or you can alternate. But the more you practice painting, you learn to spin and manipulate your brush in different ways as you paint, which is really fun. You're mastering the use of a single brush. So just know, if you have a big brush in your hand, you don't always have to use that wide brush stroke. You can spin that brush to have a more narrow brush stroke to get into those smaller areas. And that takes practice. Now, Douglas, I'm thinking of you. You have a lot of lily pads to paint around, sir. I hope that's going okay. So Douglas is probably using a smaller brush, if I guess. Douglas might be using that number 5 brush or a smaller brush, but he might be a pro. He might be able to navigate that brush pretty well. I don't know. Douglas has been in a lot of these classes, so I think he probably has mastered the one brush by now. And I'm using a little water. You can be playful, right, with how you apply this paint. I'm continuing to be really fun and fluid on how I'm bringing this black paint on. So the river for me was coming from that top left corner, kind of flowing down. A little black, a little bit of white. Hey, might as well bring in a little bit of gray. And blend it in with that black as it's wet. That's really fun. You can do some nice, long, smooth, fluid brush strokes. And turn this a little bit. It's a little wet. There we go. And again, you can reshape your fish if you want. And the good thing about holding white space for these fish is because they're white and orange in color. So imagine the amount of time we're saving of the layers of white that we'd have to put on top of black. We could have done that, but to be mindful of the duration of the class, we held space, right? And I'm just gently painting around. Again, I'm alternating between black and gray. Painting around these fish. Using a little water even helps tremendously. You don't have to use a lot, but a little, you can save a lot of paint just by dipping your brush in a little bit of water. Just makes it a little bit more fluid to move that paint around. You can really kind of recreate For me, I don't want to see any little white nicks in the canvas. For me, I want this to be nice and solid in color. Little water, a little bit of paint. As you work your way down the picture, down your painting. And then once you start getting some base colors in, you can do some continuous brush strokes on top to really refine how the water is moving, like coming all the way down around one fish and all the way down to the bottom. So that's where you can have some real fun in creating the texture for this water. So we're just focusing on just filling this in. That is the achievement we're looking to unlock, nothing else. If you want to get fancy and add texture in as you go, feel free. That's kind of like a bonus. But for me, I'm just trying to fill this in, adding a little texture along the way, but minimally, because we're going to add more. All right. If there's any questions, let me know. I think you're all pros here at painting this background. This is taking a little while. Is it taking a while for everyone, or is it just me? Am I being super pokey? No, it's taking a while. Okay. Okay, cool. I saw people nodding and smiling like I'm not the only one. Okay, cool. We're all doing this together. Well, don't forget to enjoy your beverage along the way. I did just get a little paint on my sweater, so I'm going to excuse myself and go get that out with a little soap and water. So I'll be right back. Keep on painting and see you in just a minute. Okay, I'm back. Roll up those sleeves, ladies and gents. So you don't get paint on your sweater like me. All right. Note to self, if you get acrylic paint on your clothes, immediately go and get some soap and water and it should come out. I will wash that sweater tonight. So we are filling in this background. That is our objective. I'm using a little white and a little gray, tucking in around some of these objects. Then you want your water to flow nice and smoothly. So you might want to do a couple coats of paint in some areas. And this is where you kind of lean back as you get your layers going. You lean back just to refine. But that's where it's fun. You can kind of pick where your water is coming in and kind of move that around as needed. those are all things we can refine as we go. But focus on filling in this background so we can work on additional elements as a group. Because as you know, one of the benefits of these virtual classes is this recording will be available for you if you need it, but also you can take as much time as you want to finish this. If you want to spend another hour or two, you can. But I want to get us through all of the details if possible, most of them anyways. So I am going to just try to fill in as much as this as possible. And this is where you can see our work is starting to come to life. It's quite pretty. And then a little wet black paint with a little bit of gray, you can create some really fun movement in your water, which is quite nice. Very nice. So I'm getting closer down to the bottom here. I'm sure many of you are as well. If you are working and you want to add in some grays for some fun movement, one of the best things you can do once the black is entirely in is just kind of reflect on what you have. And then maybe make a little bit of a lighter gray and add a little water to it. The water is really forgiving. So I'll do that and I'll show you what it looks like. I made a little bit of a gray, and with my palette, I have a little bit of a well, and I added a little water to it. And with this big brush, I'm just going to be courageous and just add in some fun water movement, kind of coming down and tucked around. And any of these lines that I don't like, I can always paint over them. But this should just give me ever so slightly a little bit of subtle water movement. And I'm using the edge of the big brush, tucking in and around my fish like they're actually swimming through a stream. So this is a light gray and water, and I'm using the flat side of this big brush. You can use a, and this is really cool. It's actually creating movement in my stream. And I'm kind of starting up in that top corner and working my way around. And you don't need a lot of this, but one of the fun things about acrylics is you can layer colors. So I'm using that flat side, and I'm slowly just tucking these gray movement lines like right around my fish. Like they're all swimming to the bottom right-hand corner. Like they're going around the lily pads and coming out one way. And these aren't even fish yet, which is kind of cool. They are. They're white silhouettes, but just do lots of little layers of this gray is kind of cool. And check your lighting too. For me, I have a really bright light on me right now, so I'm gonna kind of check myself before I go a little too crazy. But it looks good to me. I leaned back, checked it out. All right. But you want your shapes to be nice and fluid. And this is really cool. I don't know if you can see it on my screen. I'm going to bring it a little closer. I think you can see it though. Look at that fun movement I've created. Now yours does not have to be like that. That's just what I was inspired to do. And all good. But have fun with that. Play with the grays, right? I'm challenging you to try bringing in a second color if you want to try it. I missed the black part. Look at this. This is about teach mindfulness in these classes about pausing and reflecting. I have a big old white gap. I missed part of my water. That's why we stop and we look at what we're doing along the way. All good. There. Now my lily pad is floating again. So I'm gonna let everyone finish your water, like at a really high level, get a black basin like I have. I'm just gonna let it sit there and I'm gonna let it dry. I'm gonna go back and play with my lotus flowers a little bit with a little bit of white, just to kind of bring them to life a little bit. But we're gonna do the fish next as a group. So take a few minutes just to refine any of the water details. And we're not done with our water yet. This is just a base water. We're gonna add in some other things as well. But we want this to dry, just like anything. We always start with one layer and then we can always add on. Like with this lotus flower, I'm gonna add a little bit of more white, like Lisa added some really beautiful extra white. And I'm using a little water and a little white just to really highlight some of these lotus edges. But take this time just to have fun and refine anywhere that you want. And we'll do the fish. I'll keep an eye on the clock. We'll start the fish in like 3 minutes. We're going to come back to other areas, but I'll give us all 3 full minutes to just finish the water. And then if you're done with your water for right now, like me, you can just play with another area just to refine and whatever you want in that time. So I'll keep an eye on the clock. We'll do our fish in 3 minutes, and we'll also do our lily pads as well soon. We'll do our fish first. So base colors of objects. So the lily pads are drying, but we'll go back in and we'll add a little pizzazz to those as well. The detail on the lily pads is going to be quite pretty. And on the lotus, I'm using water and a little white just to kind of bring in and highlight some of these edges a little bit more. And you can see the difference from my bottom flower to the top flower of the work that I'm doing. And I mixed a little water and a little bit of white on my palette, kind of like a watery, call it a water wash. And I'm using my pinky to stabilize. And any additional details you're inspired to bring into any of these elements, feel free. Again, I will always encourage that. Middle of these flowers, you could add a little bit of like a light yellow. I love mixing white and a little bit of yellow together for a soft canary. If you'd like to add a little bit of a bright yellow detail, you may. For a canary, soft kind of muted yellow could be very pretty. That'll give us 2 solid more minutes to finish the background. That's what I would like your first achievement to be here. And then we'll jump to the fish together as a group. Should be quite fun. And we'll use an orange as the base color for the fish. But we're going to keep playing with whatever details or any refinement in that background and the water right now. My water, I'm just letting it dry. And we will come back again, we'll come back to the flowers if you don't have time right now. Don't worry about it. I'm adding a little bit of yellow to the interior. It's white and yellow mixed together. To the interior of these flowers, just a little bit. Probably do a second coat on that to really make them pop. All right, keeping an eye on the time here. 7:28. So clean your brush really well if you're done with the black water. Any brushes you're not using, always kind of keep them in your water cup, rinse them really well. You can either keep them in your water cup or you can kind of wipe them off and lay them on a paper towel next to your water cup. Either works fine. I typically like to do that, but my brushes have been sitting in my water cup all class, so whatever works. We're going to transition to doing the fish together next, which is going to be quite fun. So we'll slowly transition. We'll come back to our flowers and our lily pads to continue to refine the detail. For the fish are orange and white in color. So orange spots on a white fish. So we're going to find an orange. If anyone doesn't have an orange, I actually do have an orange, so I'm going to use the orange I have on hand. If you don't have an orange and you need to make an orange, yellow and a touch of red will make orange. So take a minute to mix an orange. If you have an orange ready, put a little bit on your plate. I'm going to show you how much I put on my plate. You do not need much at all. This is probably way too much right there. It's probably like the size of my index fingernail. It's probably too much, but that's okay. I'll use most of it likely. But I'm going to use a small brush. So I want to be in control over these orange spots that we're going to add on our fish. And these are kind of long spots that will kind of, it's kind of like splotchy a little bit. Go for a splotchy spot look, I guess. So we'll do this together. And we're going to hold white space for the base color. Maybe the base color of these fish are white and you have orange spots. You can do however you want to paint this fish. But I'm going to do kind of orange spots and I'm going to start on the head. And you really can do them wherever. So I'm just going to start painting some orange spots on my fish. And I'm just going to fill them in as I go. And they don't have to be perfectly round. They can go off to the edge of the fish like it's wrapping around their body. Just do some smooth, nice brush strokes as you fill in these areas. And you want nice, smooth edges as well. So for your spots, have a nice clean edge. And some of these might carry up the body. See how I'm going up the body a little bit? And I might alternate from the left to the right side. So you can do some thoughtful planning for your fish's spots. Leaving white space. And try not to do these like rounded. Try to add in like a little bit of a bump here or there, just to make it look a little bit more natural. Kind of like if you're painting a cow, you wouldn't do round circles on a cow for spots, right? You'd have them be different shapes and sizes. And you can always start somewhere. Like for me, I might change some of these. I might come in a little bit over here and come down. because that's where you bring in a little bit of mindfulness, and you can change these as you go. So for me, I might do like a little bit of a shorter one, a little bit of a longer spot. Doesn't matter. If you end up not liking these, you can always change the shape. You can always put white on top of it. So all good. Just kind of lean back in your chair. Figure out the balance of spots or the color that you want on your fish. And as we get towards the end of the tail, I'm going to stay lighter, but if you wanted to add a little bit of orange down there, you can. And for me, I want to add a little bit more. I don't have enough orange, so you might come to that realization where you might want your orange to be a little more heavier in areas. And I'll likely do a second coat of orange on these spots, so it's nice and clean. And I'm using my pinky to stabilize my hand. I might just let that guy just sit right there for right now as I go and do my other fish. This one, I'm gonna get a little crazy. These fish are coming to life before our eyes, ladies and gents. And there is so much depth we can add to these fish. I'll try to give you as much detail in this 2-hour window. And if anyone leaves, I certainly understand. I will share this recording. And I'm staying out of my fins right now. For me, my fins are going to be white. I'm actually going to bring a little bit of black in them to really highlight some of the fin-like texture. And this fish's body is kind of going off the back of the canvas. So again, you can add as much or as little of this orange as you wish. I don't know about you, but these koi fish come in all shapes and sizes. Some koi have like yellow on them, some have black spots. If you want to add some black spots in these fish, like go for it. There are so many different types of koi fish and they're all so stunning. But this orange is just a base color, a part of our fish. So I'm going to kind of lean back. Mine are very spotty. So if your fish are really spotty and you want to kind of connect some of these details, you can connect some of these if you want to make it look a little more streamlined. So I just added like a little thin connector and it gave it a totally different look back here. It really just helped continue this down. And I might do a little bit of that right here just to see what it looks like. And if you do something you don't like, guess what? You can always bring in a little bit of white to create a, to open it up again. That's totally fine. So I'm just going to bring a little bit of this down just to see how it goes. Again, art's just about experimenting, and I don't mind doing that. There. I want you to get to a spot where you're happy with these fish. you want to use white anywhere to really fine tune like this background color of the fish, you can. Another thing that I'll show us next is I'm going to have everybody mix like a little bit of gray, just taking black with a little bit of white. And we're going to start to outline some of these fins. So we're going to hold the white space and we're going to kind of fill in the negative space as we go. So if anybody wants to try this, I'm going to do very thin lines, holding the white space, coming in to give my fish some fin texture. And I'm going to do a gray kind of wash on top of this, but I'm going to do some texture first. So I'm going to kind of dye down some of this white. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. If I take a little bit of water, and you can gently do a little bit of water on top of this. So it turns it into a really soft gray. Then guess what? You can always bring more white in, creating just a little bit of a soft fin. There's a lot of ways that you can get there, but I'm just doing some really thin lines. And I'm doing a small, like a slight wash on top of it once this dries. Any way that you want to add in this texture, feel free. So I did some lines coming in. I'm going to let it dry for a minute, and then I'm going to go do a wash over it. So I'm just doing thin, kind of watery gray lines to highlight these white fins. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here with these fins in the back. Thin lines, and use the smallest brush you have. And follow the fin. It can round with the fin. It could be straight. Just give it a shot. Bringing it a little closer, just thin lines. And I'm going to do a gray wash over that, just like this fin right here. See how it kind of fades in a little bit? That's my approach to doing this. You can do it another way. Totally fine. You want these to be fairly dry, but I'm just doing a little water just to kind of dye down the white, just a little bit. Because I want the fins to stand out, but getting a little bit of a glare. I'm just going to turn this. There we go. So any way you want to texturize these fins, I guess the moral of the story is just go for it. But I like the soft wash over. Gives it a little bit of a fluid look purposefully. And you can make your fins as light or as dark as you want. I'm going for like that kind of soft gray color, like the picture. They're white-ish, right? But if you want to get there a little differently, absolutely fine. Anywhere you want to kind of fill in your fish to make your fish entirely white. So for me, I have black lines in some areas. You want your fish to be really nice and clean on all the edges. So you can always use a little bit of white as well.
And you can bring some of these gills kind of down the edge of the fish. The fish has little eyes on the side of its head. Down there. You can give it like a little bit of a mouth if you want. The eyes are on the side, two little dots on the edges of its head.
So for these fins, just find a technique that works for you. If you have any questions, please let me know. But this is where you are the artist and you can try any technique that you want to fill in this fin detail. And you might still be working on your fish in the orange. That's okay too. But I will transition to do the lily pads in just a minute so folks can be, you can keep working in any ways that you want, but to make sure we hit all the details for our call tonight. So I'm just adding some detail to my fins. I'm going to let them dry and then I do a little bit of the gray wash. For me, that's what I'm going to try to start with. Again, art is about refinement and just kind of playing as you go. I don't know about you all, but this is quite fun. I hope you are enjoying this tonight so far. It's quite different, but I like it.
There's also a little bit of a fin on the top of the fish. Anybody wants to add a little bit of a gray line? Adding a little bit of a fin, you can do that. And come up with your own ideas.
All right. You can also use a little bit of this watery gray. Teach you a little bit of a three-dimensional trick here. A little bit of water and a little bit of this gray. This is really, I'm kind of making a little bit of a lighter gray with water. You can highlight for your fish's body to stand out. So on the edges of your fish, you can bring in, so the top of your fish is more white, but on the edges around its mouth, you can add in a little bit of gray for depth. So on the inside, adding in a little bit of gray. The top of the fish still stays really nice and bright. You can add in as much or as little gray on your white fish as you want, because fish aren't typically all white, right? They have a little bit of a color tinge to them. So if you wanted to add a little bit of a soft gray kind of filling in your fish, you can. That will make it look a little bit more textured, a little bit more natural. So I'm doing a little bit of gray kind of inside the white in some areas. I'm just kind of going for it. Again, if you add too much gray on the fish, you can always add white and add it back. But the the water really helps soften the paint pigment. So that's kind of a nice trick. The gray looks great inside the fish. I don't know if anybody's tried that or not, but it's really quite neat. Very soft, watery gray. You can even add it around the edges. Bring it a little closer so you can see it. It's very subtle. I mean, I can see it in person, but let me see if I can get the right angle without the glare. Hard to see, but try it. All right, so in just a minute, I'll pivot to the lily pads just in case folks have to go. But I'm just going to do a base watery wash on top of these fins of my second fish just to finish that. And then I'll kind of reflect on my work and go from there. And if there's any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I would love to see folks work as well. So I could even pause here and we can do a quick group check-in. We haven't done this in a while. If you want to unmute yourself, we'd love to hear you. Lisa, beautiful. This is where we all get to see each other's fish. Oh, very cool. Blue water. Jill, that looks great with the blue. Awesome. Terry, look at your fish. Did you trace those? Those are quite perfect. Nice. Jill, very nice. Your fish have some swagger to them. They're swimming pretty quickly. Awesome. All right, Miss Linda, how are you doing? Douglas, your fish look awesome. Look at yours. Oh, beautiful. Linda, that looks awesome. I love the contrast with the black of the background, and the pink flowers and the fish. Well done, everyone.
I like those colors.
Isn't it beautiful?
Yes, very nice. I love those combinations.
Oh, so fun.
I love it, Linda. Awesome.
I know, it's good. All right. Thank you everyone for sharing. It's so much fun to see your work as we progress. And if we don't do a group shot tonight, I'd love folks, if you want to send me a picture, I'd love to see that. And once you're done, so I can take a look. So I will show folks how to add some detail to these lily pads. It's going to make a big difference quite easily. We started with that dark green kind of lily pad. What we're going to do is we'll add a little bit of a lighter green kind of edging. And the edging isn't going to be directly on the edge. It's going to be in just a little bit. And the first color I'm going to start with is just that green grass, kind of grass green. And I'm going to do a really small brush. So the thinner these lines for the lily pad, the better. And where the edge of the lily pad is, I want you to come down like 1/4 of an inch so we can still see the dark edge. But I want you to do a little bit of a green line, just starting to make it pop. And for me, I'm going to mix a little bit of white with it so it stands out a little bit more. If you want to add a little yellow, there's a little bit of a yellow tinge as well. So I'm just mixing a little bit of a lighter green so you can see it. And we're going to outline. Again, not on the direct edge, but kind of in just a little bit. Look at that. It's starting to highlight the shape. Okay. So highlight the exterior of each of these. And this is a little bit of green, a little white, and I had a little yellow. I don't know if the yellow is coming through or not, but I'm going to do this for each of these. And you can decide if you want to do it for each or not. I am. You can spin your brush on your palette to have a nice fine line. See how these three lily pads just jumped out? Kind of neat. Doing a little bit of an outline. But wait, there's more. We'll do more in just a minute. But I'll zoom this down. There's also a little bit of like texture, a little bit of a starburst in some of these too. So like there's a little bit of a center. So I'm kind of creating like a little bit of a starburst, some lines. And I got some green paint, too much. That's all right. We can always go in and touch it up. You can always use your finger. So you're just going to add a little bit of texture to some of these lily pads. Just doing a very soft kind of starburst, because in the middle, there's like a little bit of a yellowish green to kind of connect. So it's adding a little bit of kind of fun
nature texture. I'm kind of doing like a soft swipe with like a yellowish green, just to kind of create a little bit of this lily pad growth. It's kind of like these are the veins of the lily pad that are growing out. And anywhere you want to use a little bit of like a darker paint to cover it up, you can do as much or as little of this as you want. Let's see, I might do a little bit here. You don't need to do too much, but just kind of use your eye. Again, if you don't like something you did, you can always come in with a darker green. Kind of come in and fix it. You also know that if you do something you don't like, let it dry first, because if you don't let it dry, it will smudge, and we don't really want smudging to happen. We've all smudged things we didn't want in the past. But for me, I'm just kind of having fun doing a little soft sweeping, like a little bit of a starburst effect, just to bring this lily pad to life right here. And these veins are, there's 5 or 6 of them. Kind of have fun with your colors a little bit. So some darker greens. I came in here with a darker green. I came in here just to do some soft blending, just to kind of make it look a little bit more natural. I'm kind of making these a little bigger in some areas, just to kind of blend it in. So I'm just going to lean back as I go. I'll do the same thing down here. Any kind of texture, this vein-like texture you want to add. You might like this, you might not. Totally fine. Add a little down here. And this dark green of the lily pad, we did that purposefully, if you remember, because we were coming in with lighter colors on top. So if you need to make your lily pad darker to really highlight, to see some of this brighter detail, feel free to use like that dark green. For me, my lily pad down here isn't very dark. So I might come in with some darker greens. So those veins in that lighter green can kind of stand out a little bit more. Kind of fun. I'm going to do the same thing up here. You might notice your brush strokes of your lily pads might need a little extra love. Like this one up here is painted horizontal. What was I thinking? All good. As artists, we just keep on keeping on. But having this starburst kind of texture will help bring a little bit of realism to these lily pads. So for me, I'm making this one darker up here because I really want to see the veins of the lily pad come through. So you might want to darken some areas to really see the contrast of those green veins. And I'm mixing a little green and a little yellow for some of those veins. And they can be as thin or as thick as brush strokes as you wish. And the contrast in these lily pads is where it will really bring the detail to life. So for me, my lily pads, I want to be darker. So I'm going to come in with some of this forest green and maintain some of the veins, but I'm going to make it darker in some areas because that brightness is really stunning to me. So I'm going to kind of go around and just ever so slightly add a little more darker contrast because it will allow me to appreciate the detail. And that's for me. You may think the same thing, you may disagree. Totally fine. Just sharing one perspective with you. And I used green, I used black to kind of get that darker tone. So I'm going to mix a little more of that. And we'll keep painting together just for another 3 minutes. you can certainly keep painting on your own, but I'll check in with the group. I'm obviously going over some detail for the lily pads right now, but I'll kind of pause on my end with this instruction and just check in. Is there any details in the next 3 minutes that I can review for you that you might need a little, you might have questions on, you might want to have a little bit more refinement? Just let me know. Otherwise, you can keep on painting. But for me, I'm adding in a little more green contrast, and you can start to see what that's doing. It's really starting to highlight that green exterior line that I added, but it has that shaded black line for that depth to bring this right out. But for me, I want to really make sure the overall, like the base color of this lily pad is a little darker, and that will really highlight some of the detailed work that I want to pull through. Yours may already be really dark. Yours, you may not want yours to be dark. Totally fine either way. But for me, I like that dark contrasting look. It's giving me a little bit of a glow off the top. That's kind of how I'm interpreting it as an artist tonight. And that's the look for me that I want to achieve for each of these, is that dark contrast, but the glow of the veins kind of coming off. For me, that's what I want to enjoy. And we'll each see something that we really like, a style, a use of color. And that's where we all really just focus and do our own thing in that regard. You could do some kind of round circular shapes of a darker green just to kind of resurface and highlight. But experiment a little bit with this. It's quite fun to take our time and to use different colors of green. This is what, if we could achieve this in all of my classes, if we had all the time in the world, you can do a lot if you just slow down and you try new things. And this is such a good example of using 2 or 3 tones of green to just bring an object to life in whatever way that you want, whether they're dark like mine or not. It's all good. How's this going for everyone? I think you're all doing such a great job. There's additional detail with the fish and movement in the picture with regards to gray or whitish gray lines. I'll show you that as a final tip as we wrap up. Using a little, make sure you clean your brushes really well as you switch colors. I'm going to get a little bit of white and a little bit of black and do a little bit of water. And I'm going to have a really soft kind of watery gray. And in the picture, you can see there's some like round, I don't want to call it splashing, but like some very specific movement from these fish. So with a very thin brush, you can kind of come in here and create movement from these fish. So as an example, very specific movement these fish are creating. If you add a line that you don't like, guess what? You can come in with a little bit of black, smudge it with your finger and make it go away. But this is just, I wanted to show you this technique of adding in a little bit of this kind of rounded movement from your fish. You can create as much as you wish around these creatures. It also helps, this lighter detail helps bring more movement to the water as well, not only your fish. So as an example, I'll do a couple of swoops, some soft rounded swoops. It also can just be more movement as well. So just an example that you can consider incorporating into your picture. For me, I don't like this line. So guess what? I put a little bit of black over it and I can make it go away. So it's okay if you do something you don't like. Look at that. I literally it just disappeared. So you can always have some fun with what lines you add and where. So I might actually look at mine head on here and just really be in the moment of creating some really fun detail. But a painting like this can certainly, it can take a while. If your fish feel like they're too stark white, you can use a little bit of gray, and I'll just show you a little bit of gray on their bodies on these edges, just to, if you want to give your fish some whiskers, you can give your fish some whiskers, but a little bit of gray on like the edges of their body, or even in the middle, you can bring in like some lines. It just helps cut down the white if it's too much for you. We already added a little bit of gray, but don't hesitate to add a little bit more if you wanted to. It's all optional. But I'll pause and I'll look at each of you. We are right at time. We're a few minutes over, but I wanted to make sure I showed you some of those details. Let me do this. I'm going to go back to gallery. If folks are willing, I'd love to get a quick group picture just so we can kind of see and appreciate each of our work. I'm certainly excited to see yours. Oh my gosh, I am so excited to see folks. Nice work, Douglas. Lisa, I love your fish. Jill and Jill. All right, cool. So I'm gonna get down here with mine too. And Miss Jean, I can't wait to see yours too. All right. So I'll do a countdown. If folks are interested in holding their pictures up, you don't have to. You can certainly just look around. But I'll do a quick group photo. Go ahead, Linda.
How do you get in gallery? I'm only getting 6 people. I don't know why.
I don't know. I see more than 6.
I'm sure you do. Yeah. Okay. Well, I can see myself, so you'll have a big one.
Okay, great. I'll send this maybe in a follow-up email. So if folks want to just hold their pictures, I'll do a quick countdown if you want. So here's the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Tease. Awesome. So this is for me. I can look at each of your pictures up in detail. And then if some of you are still working and you want to share them with me after, I would love to see it. If you just like want to keep yours to yourself too, guess what? That's okay too. But let me go ahead and just save this so I don't lose it. Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all for coming. I'll pause. If there's any additional details, please don't hesitate to contact me at any time. But I hope you enjoyed yourselves. It was a very different, very detail-oriented inspiration, and I'm looking forward to seeing each of your work. But thank you so much for joining tonight.
Thank you. It was so much fun.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. I hope you have a
Obligated.
great Friday and a wonderful weekend. And any ideas for February's class, feel free to shoot me an email. But wonderful to see each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye.